So you're walking down the aisle at your local health food store, where you get all your supplements and your pre-workout, and you're like, man, I really need to load up on my pre-workout and, of course, my whey protein. And you're walking to the shelf, you grab your favorite tried-and-true pre-workout, but just as you start to leave, you see a bottle, and the bottle is for $70, and it says Asta 2866. And you pick it up, you turn it over, you look at the ingredients, and the number one ingredient is Asta MK2866, and you're like, what the hell is this? I have never heard of this before. So you start thinking to yourself, well, if it's $70, it must be really good, right? Is it worth that price tag? Well, I don't know. Let's talk about the science behind that.
Welcome to the Science Behind That with Atticus Hamilton.
Hello, all you scientists, and welcome on back to the Science Behind That podcast. I hope you guys are having a fantastic Friday. Oh my God, I love Fridays. It has been such a long week, for me. I'm already exhausted. I hope you guys, and it's like 4 a.m. here, so it's not even Friday yet. But I hope you guys are having a good Friday and are going to have a great weekend. Let us jump right in, waste no time, into today's episode of The Science Behind That. Before we do, go grab yourselves a nice steaming hot cup of coffee, add a little bit of maple syrup to it. That way you'll get all of those nice little autumn flavors as we go into summer right here. So, what even are SARMs? So I think that's where we have to start really with this episode. We have to talk about what SARMs are, where they came from, why they're here, who likes them, etc. So first off, what are SARMs? So a SARM is a drug, basically. They're experimental drugs known as selective androgen receptor modulators, and essentially, so they're research drugs, they're research chemicals that are in development basically as a replacement therapy for a lot of anabolic steroids. So, I know for all of you veteran listeners out there, a while ago we talked about the science behind steroids, and I think that was probably one of my longest episodes. I think it was over an hour. If you want to hear about steroids themselves, particularly anabolic steroids, definitely go take a listen to that. But ultimately, most steroids, in a very abridged version, work through a method of activating androgen-like receptors. And, through a variety of other processes, upon activation of those androgen receptors, usually that will result in either A, increased expression of endogenous testosterone, B, increased expression of testosterone through converting the steroid into testosterone, or C, increase of muscle growth because of the binding to that androgen receptor results in basically a variety of different transcription factors being translated into proteins, which then increase mitochondria in muscle cells, or increase the size of the muscle cells through a variety of other mechanisms. There's a lot of complex biochemistry there, but ultimately, SARMs and anabolic steroids for bodybuilding both affect androgen receptors. The big difference, though, is that SARMs, they don't just affect all androgen-like receptors. And that's one of the issues with anabolics, is they're sort of indiscriminate, and that's where you get a lot of these nasty hepatocytotoxicity effects, or liver toxicity effects with a lot of oral anabolic steroids, is they're binding to androgen receptors in the liver, and they're resulting in a variety of different transcription cascades that ultimately cause detrimental harm to the liver. So SARMs as a whole, then, are a group of research chemicals that are being investigated as a potential alternative to anabolics for patients with like muscular dystrophy or that thing. Or if you live in Sweden where anabolics are legal for bodybuilding as an alternative to anabolics. So that's really what a SARM is, right? Selective androgen receptor modulators. And so they're a class of therapeutic compounds that have similar properties to anabolic steroids, but ultimately with reduced androgenic properties, meaning that for women, they produce less male characteristic development and vice versa for men. So yeah, that's in a very brief sense, that's what they are. So why are they a problem? Well, so SARMs are legal in the United States as of this moment in time for use, right? Because they're research chemicals. So they're being investigated for beneficial effects. But does that mean that people can't get their hands on them? Absolutely not. And here's where the problem is, or what the problem is then, because overall, it seems like the literature suggests that SARMs may be as effective as like taking testosterone as TRT. According to a research paper here titled Selective Androgen Receptor Modulators as Pharmacological Treatments for Muscle Wasting in Ongoing Clinical Trials, they seem to determine that, SARMs have shown to improve lean body mass. However, there's still inconclusive findings as to whether or not it improves strength and physical function. That being said, though, if it's increasing or improving total lean body mass, it would be therefore increasing hypertrophy, which, to an extent would be safe to assume then that strength is increasing. However, the problem here is that because SARMs are research chemicals, they're not regulated by and because they're not technically a drug yet, and it's illegal to sell them as a drug in the US, they're not regulated by the FDA. So, basically, the SARMs that you can get easily online, and I'll name a couple of them off: Osterine MK2866, Testolone Rad 140, Caridine GW 501516, Ligandrol LGD 4033, Ibutamorin MK677, Stenabolic SR 9009, and Andrine YK11 and S23. So those are some of the most common ones that you can buy pretty much anywhere on the market, actually. You can buy Osterine MK66 just from the internet here for, it's on sale for $70 for a 1 month supply, or you can get a 2 month supply for $140. So ultimately, why am I talking about this? Because the problem is that the side effects of a lot of SARMs, they mimic aspects of testosterone. And not only that, but they mimic aspects of other steroids out there, which aren't great. And that's not even the biggest problem. We'll talk about some of the side effects a little later on. The biggest problem is that these are not approved, right? None of these are approved drugs for use. Anabolic steroids that you see in bodybuilding, they are approved, right? Testosterone is approved. Decadurabolin is approved. Dianabolin is approved. Now, you can either get those illegally or you can get a prescription for them. But SARMs, it's not the same thing. They are experimental compounds that are unregulated by the FDA because they're experimental compounds, and they're being added to pre-workouts. They are being sold as like just like secondary supplements that you can take to enhance your muscle gain, and they're being targeted towards adolescents. And this is the biggest problem. Because of the fact that they're not regulated, we have no idea the full scope of side effects. I mean, for example, we may be able to say that, yes, Ostarine MK2866 has these side effects, but what about Rad 140? Or I don't know, what about Ibuta 677 or Ibutamorin MK677. So none of these are regulated because they're all experimental, and because of that, you then have undetermined side effects that may or may not show up, and some of them may be even worse than just taking Decadurabolin with beta blockers and statins. You know what I'm saying? Because beta blockers and statins would sort of, to an extent, counteract the effects of the Decadurabolin. But anyway, that's the big problem with the SARMs, selective androgen receptor modulators. So overall, they have been shown to help in improving total lean body mass and hypertrophy, but some of the side effects of SARMs may include reduced good cholesterol, hepatotoxicity, which is liver cell death or liver cell toxicity, and hypothalamic pituitary gonadal axis suppression. And I know some of you are like, what did he just say? So hyponatal pituitary, man, I just forgot what I just said. Hypothalamic pituitary gonadal axis suppression is basically when the communication pathway between the hypothalamus, pituitary gland, and the gonads becomes suppressed. So in a very brief sense, what this means is one side effect would be lower sperm count, right? Lower endogenous testosterone production, maybe even the shrinking of the testicles in men, like we see with a variety of anabolic steroids. And of course, there are a lot of potential life-threatening side effects about SARMs, including the risk of heart attack and stroke. But again, the long-term side effects of long-term repeated use is unknown. And so ultimately then, at the end of the day, it's really important to keep an eye open for these products and for substances that are SARMs that may be hiding in the workout supplements or the athletic performance supplements that we all use. In addition, with what we talked about, mood swings, again, decreased testicular size and acne were reported in a variety of patients in more than 50% of users. And, so at this point, there's some questions that need to be asked. Is it, if you're using SARMs for athletic purposes, is the increased muscle mass worse or worth the potentially worse side effects than just anabolic steroids to begin with? Ultimately, I would say no. And you know me, ladies and gentlemen, I'm against using PEDs for athletics. I mean, if you want to, you can, but I don't really think it's a great idea. But this is definitely a problem. And it's something that we all should keep our eyes open for. And you know what? Hopefully, down the line, maybe one of these SARMs will be determined to be effective and relatively side effect free, but at this moment in time, there's just not enough data and not enough research to show that is the case. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for listening to today's episode of The Science Behind That. I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and I hope you guys have a fantastic weekend. As usual, I will see you all on Monday. And remember, until then, stand up and question everything.